The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with the hum of countless alien voices. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy, creatures of every imaginable shape and size, convened to deliberate pressing matters of interstellar governance. Among the sea of advanced species sat humanity's envoy, a small, unassuming figure dwarfed by the imposing presence of more ancient and powerful civilizations. Discussions turned to humanity, the youngest member of the council. They were described as fragile, emotional, and insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Whispers filled the chamber about Earth's peculiar history, its wars, its art, its rapid technological advancements. Yet none of this impressed the council. To them, humans were merely an oddity, a species that, despite its intelligence, lacked the physical prowess or innate superiority of other members. They are too soft, a delegate with glistening scales and predatory eyes declared, his voice dripping with disdain. Always mediating, always pleading for diplomacy. It's a wonder they've survived this long. Another representative, a hulking creature with multiple limbs, chuckled. Their peace treaties are laughable. They bend over backward to avoid conflict. They've mistaken their survival for strength. A ripple of agreement spread through the room. Humanity's envoy remained silent, their face impassive as they listened to the veiled insults. It wasn't the first time they'd heard such things, nor would it be the last. To the Galactic Council, humanity's greatest strength, its adaptability and diplomacy, was perceived as weakness. The Council viewed peace as an inability to fight, a sign of inferiority. One species, the Thralok, took particular interest in this narrative. Known for their brutish nature and militaristic culture, they saw humans as ripe for exploitation. The Thralok delegate leaned forward, a cruel grin spreading across his jagged face. Perhaps we should test their resolve, he suggested, his tone dripping with malice. A species like theirs needs to learn its place. The council chuckled nervously but didn't outright dismiss the suggestion. To them, humanity was a minor player in a vast, complex game. Even if provoked, they doubted humans could muster anything beyond protests and pleas for intervention. Humans have survived by luck, another alien scoffed, his bioluminescent tendrils pulsing faintly. Without allies, they are nothing. As the discussion continued, the human envoy finally stood, their movement drawing surprised glances. They spoke calmly, their voice carrying an unexpected weight. We joined this council in good faith, they began, their tone measured but firm. Not because we are weak, but because we value unity. Do not mistake our preference for peace as an inability to act. The room fell silent, the confidence in the envoy's words unsettling some of the delegates. Yet the Thralok sneered, unimpressed. Bold words from a fragile species, he mocked. The human envoy didn't respond directly. Instead, they looked around the room, their gaze steady. We've endured far worse than insults, they said quietly. Remember that, as the meeting adjourned, the council remained largely unmoved. They believed humanity's words were mere bravado, an attempt to mask their vulnerability. The Thralok, however, saw an opportunity, a chance to assert their dominance and test humanity's limits. They would learn soon enough that even a peaceful species has its breaking point. The Thralok wasted no time in acting on their ambitions. Their fleet descended on the outer human colonies with ruthless efficiency, targeting settlements that were remote and lightly defended. Small space stations, agricultural hubs, and mining outposts became the first casualties. Entire communities were devastated before any response could be organized. Messages of desperation streamed across human communication channels. Survivors recounted horrors of destruction, families torn apart, and entire settlements razed to the ground. The Thralok took hostages, not for negotiation, but to serve as trophies of their dominance. To the Thralok, this was a mere display of strength, a warning to humanity not to overstep its bounds in the galactic arena. Humanity's initial reaction was measured, adhering to their principles of diplomacy. Earth's delegation sent a formal appeal to the Galactic Council, detailing the attacks and pleading for intervention. Evidence was provided, horrifying images of destroyed outposts, recordings of Thralok ships bombing defenseless stations, and testimonies from the few survivors who had escaped the massacres. The council, however, was unmoved. Most delegates viewed the situation as a localized skirmish, not worth the political or military resources required for intervention. The Thralok, of course, denied any wrongdoing, their representative claiming the reports were exaggerations and that any hostilities were defensive actions. In private, the human envoy confronted the council's leadership. "You've seen the evidence," they argued. "These attacks are not random, they are deliberate acts of aggression. If you allow this to continue, it sets a dangerous precedent for every species in this council." The response was dismissive. "This is an internal matter," one of the senior counselors replied. "Humanity must resolve its own disputes. The council cannot be drawn into every conflict." The human envoy's tone hardened. "And when they come for your colonies, when they decide your species is just as expendable as ours, will you still call it an internal matter then?" The council's silence was answer enough. Humanity was on its own. Back on Earth, news of the council's inaction spread like wildfire. Anger and frustration boiled over among the populace. The images of destroyed colonies and grieving families became symbols of the galaxy's indifference. Protests erupted in major cities, demanding a response. Within days, human leadership convened a summit. It was clear that diplomacy had failed, but the decision to escalate wasn't taken lightly. Voices in the room were divided. Some advocated for continued pleas to the council, hoping to sway them through persistence. Others argued that humanity needed to take a stand, to show the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated. "We've spent decades proving our willingness to cooperate," one general said, his voice firm. "And what has it earned us? Disdain. If we do nothing, they'll keep pushing. We need to remind them who we are." The final decision was unanimous. Humanity would respond not recklessly, but with precision. "We are a peaceful people," the human leader declared. "But peace does not mean submission. If the council won't act, then we will." Across the planet and its colonies, preparations began. Factories ramped up production, not for trade but for war. Scientists and engineers unveiled projects that had been kept in the shadows. Advanced weaponry, experimental spacecraft, and defensive systems capable of rivaling even the most powerful galactic forces. Messages were sent to the Thralok, demanding an immediate cessation of hostilities and the return of all hostages. The response came swiftly and arrogantly. "We do not negotiate with prey," their leader snarled. "Submit or face annihilation." Humanity's patience, already stretched thin, snapped entirely. The message was clear. Peace was no longer an option. The first strike came without warning. A human stealth fleet, unseen by even the most advanced sensors, descended upon a key Thralok supply depot deep within their territory. The attack was surgical, precise, and devastating. Orbital defenses were neutralized within moments, rendering the Thralok forces helpless. Explosions lit up the void as humanity's weapons, far more advanced than anyone had anticipated, dismantled the facility with chilling efficiency. Word of the strike spread quickly. The Thralok, so accustomed to being the aggressors, were stunned. They had expected retaliation to be clumsy and emotional, a desperate flailing of an inferior species. Instead, they faced a calculated and methodical response that struck at the heart of their logistics. It was not an act of vengeance, it was a declaration of capability. Across human space, the shift in tone was unmistakable. The quiet determination that had defined humanity's approach to galactic affairs was replaced by a resolute focus. Fleets mobilized with precision, operating under strategies honed through centuries of conflict on Earth. Scientists and engineers, long accustomed to working under the constraints of peace, now unleashed innovations they had kept in reserve for fear of provoking the very conflict they now faced. In private strategy meetings, human leaders reviewed the Thralok's strengths and weaknesses. They analyzed every aspect of their military, culture, and leadership, seeking vulnerabilities to exploit. It became clear that the Thralok relied heavily on their reputation for brutality to keep their enemies in line. Their fleets were powerful, but their tactics were blunt and predictable, designed to overwhelm rather than outmaneuver. Humanity's response was the opposite. Instead of meeting the Thralok head-on, they targeted critical infrastructure, supply lines, communication hubs, and shipyards. Each strike was executed with near-perfect precision, minimizing casualties while maximizing damage. The Thralok, unprepared for this kind of warfare, struggled to adapt. The Galactic Council, meanwhile, could no longer ignore the escalating conflict. Reports flooded in from member species detailing humanity's sudden and overwhelming effectiveness in battle. Council chambers buzzed with shock and confusion. How had humanity, a species they had dismissed as fragile and unremarkable, managed to bring a powerhouse like the Thralok to its knees? The Thralok delegate, once so confident, now spoke with a mixture of anger and desperation. "They have deceived us all," he roared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "This is not the act of a peaceful species. They are more dangerous than we ever imagined." The human envoy, seated quietly among the delegates, finally rose to speak. "We warned you," they said calmly, their gaze sweeping across the room. "We asked for your help. You ignored us. You underestimated us. And now, the Thralok are learning the cost of mistaking peace for weakness." The council erupted into debate, but the human envoy paid it no mind. Their focus was elsewhere, on ensuring that humanity's message was unmistakably clear. In the field, human forces continued their campaign with unwavering determination. They avoided civilian targets, ensuring that their actions were not acts of terror but of justice. Hostages were liberated during daring raids, their stories of survival further fueling humanity's resolve. For every colony that had been destroyed, humanity made sure the Thralok paid tenfold. The Thralok leadership, once so confident in their superiority, found themselves cornered. Their fleets, once symbols of dominance, were now scattered and in disarray. Their leaders faced growing unrest among their own ranks, as even their soldiers began to question the wisdom of provoking a species that had proven to be far more formidable than anyone had anticipated. Humanity, for its part, remained focused on its goal, not conquest but survival. Every move they made was deliberate, designed to send a message not just to the Thralok but to the entire galaxy. Humanity was not to be trifled with. Peace was always their preference, but they would not hesitate to defend themselves when pushed. As the Thralok's resources dwindled and their forces faltered, their leaders were forced to consider the unthinkable: surrender. For a species so deeply entrenched in a culture of dominance, the very idea was almost incomprehensible. Yet humanity had left them with no other choice. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the Thralok's once mighty empire began to crumble. The Council, previously so dismissive of humanity, now scrambled to reassess their place in the interstellar order. What had started as an underestimation of a fragile species had turned into a lesson in the true meaning of strength.